Well, that's
Yeah.
it's a beautiful scene there, and so welcome everybody. We have Juan, as you guys can see, Juan Savin joining us again to reveal what's coming. Coming arrest, preemptive military moving into big cities. So nuclear standoff, like we're talking about. What's mainly on your mind right now, Juan?
Well, of course, I'm here in South Africa. There's a pretty large move here within South Africa to break off in the southwestern portion of the country away from the ANC-controlled communists, really. Uh, uh, Central North Africa region, and so it's actually fairly advanced. They've had almost 1,890 some odd thousand people already vote on whether or not they should, uh, leave the rest of the country and go off on their own. And it's not an official vote. It was more of kind of you know, a test within the country about whether or not people should start this secession movement. And the reasons for it are a lot like what America had when we broke off from Britain. The incredibly high taxes that are just destroying the country in many ways. A good example is Goodyear Tire, who has a large facility here in South Africa. They just recently decided to just give up and go away, walk away from hundreds of millions of dollars worth of infrastructure, property, investments like that, and just go away. Mercedes is considering doing something similar, and they just can't function in this environment where the communist government, for example, one of the things that came up in the meeting earlier today with a very well-to-do businessman, he said that in the last year, his electricity costs have gone up 800%. He says it's unsustainable, and so he's got a couple thousand employees, and he's he's going to have to just fold it. And the ANC people running the country, it's just rife with corruption, payoffs. And remember, what Trump did when the South African president was there in the Oval Office. He was like one of the Harlem Globetrotters. He runs around the ring there in the Oval Office, runs over to the president of South Africa and pantses him to the whole world. That are being facilitated here in South Africa. It's almost like it's a free-for-all. And anybody that's working with them or assisting them. And by the way, here in South Africa, one of the things that people need to understand, there's really three different types of people in the way that they see it. They have coloreds, whites, and blacks. So the coloreds, by most of the black population, are considered, essentially white. The blacks are people that they consider that they were here to begin with. They're a smaller portion of the population, say down here in Cape Town. 17% of the population here in Cape Town is white. About 55% of the population is what they called coloreds. And then the remainder is black. And those numbers have gone up because they've done something else. They're bringing people in from East Africa, north and east, down to the Cape area at the southern tip here, and just planting them in these huge shanty villages, literally just built, land that's taken from somebody, and they just start building on it. thousands and thousands and thousands of these tin-roofed dwellings. The rest of the area is relatively advanced, modern, but they have moved huge population here that's only here during the uh, spring, summer, fall months, and then they go home in what is the hottest part of the year in the summer. They move north, uh, uh, back home for Christmas and things like that. And but those groups that are coming down here in that period of time are probably similar to what we would, describe as being a BLM type of a population. A lot of it encouraged by Soros-controlled um, groups and money, and with the sole purpose of being a threat or a disruptive presence in this region. And the people are literally huge swaths of this region have moved to other parts of the world just in the last couple of months. Of the doctors, scientists, business people, the figure of 21,000 was used just in the last few months of people that have moved to predominantly the United States, but a lot of them to the Caribbean and to Europe to escape what's happening here, what's coming. So, and you have to understand one
I
other
saw
thing
that
about,
Trump is looking at maybe 40,000 South Africans coming to America, giving them, bring them here. So that's great.
well, and let me just say this. So as you move north from the area that I'm in, where they're the Cape of Hope is what they would, tentatively call their country, and Cape Town and like that. What's interesting about those people that Trump's encouraging, those are the large farm owners that run these huge farms that are being attacked and being moved out of the country. Uh, you know, and every day here in the central regions of South Africa, less so where I'm at because the locals won't tolerate it. They have a lot of almost like a militia-like presence of whites and coloreds, and their farms taken over, pushed off their property. So they literally are living in um, some type of uh, armed camp, trying to hold on to these farms and ranches that have been in their families literally for hundreds of years. When this region was settled by the Dutch, that was about 25, 30 years after America declared its independence. And there was a move earlier that was a pilgrim type movement, established same time as New York was established, same year even, uh, in the 1600s. And they literally had something like what we had with our settlers. They landed here in Cape Town area, and then they began to move out across the country in covered wagons. It was, instead of moving west like we did in America, they moved north and to the east, and they built out, these huge swaths of very arid lands, grasses that were really not heavily populated at the time. And then the Brits came in and kind of doubled down on the whole thing. And what started out as kind of a Christian pilgrimage type movement was hijacked and went a different direction with the British here. And so there's kind of this interesting mixed history that went on here. But in many ways, shoot, you go out, they're wearing cowboy hats. It's a cattle country. It's horses. It's an amazing area, and but with a history that, in a lot of ways, is very Americana. type
Yeah.
stuff, and then with issues that we have similar to our issues back in the States. So not exactly, but it's an interesting area.
So you're saying East Africans, they're importing them there. Is that Somali, Djibouti? What I spent time in both those
Well,
areas. Somali's not good, not a
people.
good mix.
No, it's more people out of the nation of South Africa, but from regions that are to the north of the Cape area. The
Okay.
Cape area, is fishing. It's uh, a more developed mining area and things like that. So about 15% of the total land mass of South Africa is in this what they call the Cape region, and it is protected by a fairly defensible mountain chain. That there's only certain roads that you can get into this area from. The rest of South Africa to the north, and so the people here and a number of the businessmen have been entertaining this idea of breaking off in some cases as long as 21 years. And the people represented here today, most of them have been, the movement's been increasing, and a number of the leaders said, they've been involved, a pretty common number was 5-6 years, that it's just taken on a life of its own, and it's become unbearable with what's going on. You have a lot of Americans will understand this. You have about 7% of the country paying 90+% of the taxes. You have about a little over 0.5% of the total population of South Africa paying the taxes to the 95th percentile. So it's the producers, it's the doctors, the attorneys, the business owners, the inventors, all that sort of thing are just getting, they're working to pay taxes. They're not making any money. And just like the electrical, they haven't built any new electrical generation. The nuclear plant that they have here is what it is. It's just that this communist regime keeps adding supervisors to the whole electrical grid system to where it's a carpetbagger type situation. They've got so many people on the payroll that the cost of electricity has gone up 8 times. And it's not more dependable, it's not better serviced, it's all going to graft just to pay people off, and that's what's happening in the industries. And that's why Goodyear literally just said, okay, done, huge operations here, and they've left the country. So there's not much time to do something to pull this back in most of the people's minds. And so it's do you stay and reach that point where there's nothing left to leave with, or do you leave something still in your pocket? And from a very communist mindset, they're just increasing the number of people and the weight on them. It's like in Egypt, all of a sudden Pharaoh says, not only do you have to produce bricks, you're going to have to go out and gather the straw to make the bricks with, which, they were being at least provided the straw to make bricks to, build out Egypt. But all of a sudden then their day was increased. They have to go out and gather the straw and make the bricks. And it became, so they didn't have more time in their hands to make babies or whatever. So that's kind of what's happening here in South Africa. And the people that are carrying the load are looking at a Boston Tea Party type of a situation. When do you finally say enough is enough and stand and fight and stop? And what does fight look like? They don't want to do it with lead. They want to do it with some kind of a pushback on the central government. And one of the billionaires has said publicly that Rob Herzog has said publicly that they're just going to have to, as businessmen in this region, stop sending any money, refuse to send any money to the federal government for taxes, and keep it all here at home. They aren't getting anything back. For every $100 they send, they get about 7 cents back, and most of that is in the form of support for police that are literally, and tax collectors that are literally the ones enforcing that they take everything that they have. So it's all out, nothing to actually handle roads or infrastructure or anything like that. So they've just reached that limit. Now, here's some stuff that a lot of people may not realize. Do you remember? You're just old enough to remember some of the stuff that happened with the nuclear here in South Africa. Did you ever get briefed on any of that movement of nuclear materials and creation of nuclear weapons here in South Africa?
No, I didn't. But over the years, I've worked with a lot of South Africans, trackers and breachers and explosive breaching, so forth. Outstanding people. So bringing those very gifted people that are basically producing 90% of the income tax for South Africa to the United States would be magnificent. That would basically that would take a. I would love that, and I'm sure they probably would too. I know that, like you said, they fought for that for a long time, but here we are. I don't know how this is going to end for them. This is really.
Well, think of it. Yeah, where's Elon Musk from?
Yeah. Good point.
Okay, and by the way, the babe. She's a kid. Laura Logan. Laura Logan's from South Africa.
No, I didn't know
a number of the people out there that there's quite a few. John B. Wells' wife is from South Africa. So, I know a lot of business people out of South Africa from stuff that we've had to do over the years. But here's the deal on the nuclear. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, it was reported that Israel tested their first nuclear device here in South Africa and coordinated some of the nuclear work that they had with scientists here in South Africa. And by the way, the first heart transplant with an artificial heart was done by a South African doctor.
Wow.
One of the people I was with today, great guy. In fact, we're going out to dinner here in a couple of days with our wives. He's an inventor that has developed an entirely different type of way to get energy from wave action and ocean movement, here in the oceans. Huge amounts of energy that is really something very interesting, cool. I'm aware of a lot of the wave power generation systems, and he has something that's in a whole different category. And so if you use the motion of the ocean's waters and the currents in the ocean's waters to generate electrical power, it changes the dynamics in a lot of places. And of course, here you've got this huge area, a meeting of the South Atlantic and the Indian Ocean here in this area. Whenever the Suez Canal has a problem up in the Mideast, all of the ships divert in just a few hours. Mm-hmm. And within 2-3 days, you go from 44 ships to 40 ships to, you can have 300-400 ships having to go around the horn here if the Mideast has a problem. And so this is actually a pretty critical area. The best deep water port in the southern hemisphere is right here, just a few miles from me, and where you can put carriers and like that. So it has importance for power projection, say for America. Even Elon has speculated that maybe he'll have to move his rocket launch facilities here to South Africa. It's the best place in the world to do launches to orbit using chemical rocket propulsion systems. If you go to the stuff that I'm working on with others, we don't have the same issues. But for the time being, with stuff like Elon's doing, you can put rockets into equatorial orbits, and you can put them into polar orbits from here. And when you're launching, if you're whichever direction you want to go, it's you're not doing it over populated areas where people are, etc. It even beats Diego Garcia up in the Indian Ocean. So for something high tech, the next stage for the world, the next 20, 50, 100 years, this region is going to be extremely crucial. And by the way, the shortest route to the Antarctic and the best route into the Antarctic isn't from where we're currently doing New Zealand, Australia, or from South America down at Chile and Argentina. It's from right here in South Africa. And so there's a lot of angles where this is a pretty crucial area. And but I'll tell you something, that in the West, virtually nobody knows this. The ANC was almost completely broke, literally just a few long months ago. And then a wild thing happened. Russian warships, so it was up here in the area. All of a sudden, black SUVs and trucks and everything else are showing up middle of the night. And this warship is getting stuff loaded onto it. And then there was, people were asking, what in the world is going on here? What's this deal with Russia going on? Behind the scenes, it was said by insiders that this wasn't about Russia. Russia was just transporting something for Iran. And suddenly the ANC is flush with cash again, and they've got, money for all their friends and buddies, and they're really a mobster, Capone type of an operation. And the speculation is what could possibly have been conveyed that might be going to Iran that will be of any value. Well, as I mentioned a moment ago, South Africa, people don't realize this, they're a nuclear power. South Africa, 25 years ago, was widely acknowledged as having 5 nuclear bombs. What's Iran trying to do? And enough fissile material for 5 nuclear bombs. And it was speculated that they, in fact, had gotten technology to build those bombs. They also have the technology to make the triggers and to update that. And some of that technology came out of Israel. Some of it came out of Russia. What would be the point? I've told this audience that there was a question when Krylov, the Russian general, was killed in the scooter attack in Moscow.
Yep.
What was he tracking? He was trying to track down where the materials and devices were coming from, going to, that would refresh about 200 what they call demolition nukes. They're what we would probably refer to for the most part as a suitcase type nuke. They're a little bit larger than that, but an artillery or tactical type weapon. They're not what we would call city busters that take out miles of an area. They're smaller with the explosion, but can do massive damage, and on par with a little bit bigger than Nagasaki or Hiroshima. And the contention is, and Congressman Kurt Weldon, who was on track to be head of the Armed Services Committee in Congress, 20-year congressional elected representative, up until they did some fraud to take him out of office because he was going to be head of the Armed Services Committee. Very trusted, respected congressman. He went over to Russia at Putin's invitation, early 2000s, I think it was 2005 or 6. And Putin had him meet with his top nuclear people, the directors of the programs for their military nuclear projects. He actually went out and viewed their nuclear stockpile, where key components of it were stored. And at the time he was there in the early 2000s, their scientists told him that they were missing about 200 of these demolition nukes, these small nukes, out of an inventory of about 360, I think it was. And that it was the understanding, although they didn't have records, it was all destroyed intentionally, that Gorbachev had offered all sorts of assistance to Iran at the close of the Soviet Union during the Reagan years in the late 80s. And that he had offered these things to Iran for different technical, legal, military reasons. And that Iran got 200 of these tactical nuclear devices. They weren't like a warhead you'd put on a missile and send somewhere. They were stuff you'd put in a shipping container or truck or something like that. And but most of those were close to dating out, timing out, and would have to have technical work done to refresh them. Those have never been accounted for anywhere in the world. Of course, we were looking for something off the East Coast in the months before the election 2024, or some things, and it came out that they were looking for a nuke or nukes, and they were also mapping all of these areas where those drones were at, so they had kind of a backdrop to compare, because some areas have certain types of emissions, etc., that you might hide a nuke in that area and it'd be hard to see for different reasons with emissions. But the speculation has been here in South Africa and other places that some of that material that may even have been engineered to help with refreshing some of these nukes is what was picked up here in South Africa, and didn't go right back to Russia and may have gone into Iranian hands. So in this weird moment that we're in, South Africa, that most Americans would be, whatever, I don't have time for that, it doesn't matter to me, it's other side of the world. In fact, I'm almost exactly on the opposite side of the world from Anchorage, where Trump is. You can stick right through the earth. I'm about exactly as far away from Trump right now as you can get, physically on the planet. So it's kind of fun. It's that important, though, to America, because at so many different levels, we actually are very similar people with actually a similar history going back to the Pilgrims and Puritans and like that, and then the way that we settled our regions. This is a very important part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, even the history, if you look at Michael Tellinger's work, there's ancient stone circles, Tesla technology, ancient gold mines. So there's a long history there in South Africa of, ancient cultures and so forth. But yeah, I think that, we have to wrap up all the nukes. And I think that's what President Trump is really trying to do. He wants to make sure all the world is safe. And there in South Africa, and I know you work in the Congo too, if we bring them a way and ways and means to produce and have good trade and so forth, it usually cancels out all this nonsense of war and so forth.
Well, and the problem is with what the ANC is doing. There isn't even a starter where trade could happen. That's why Trump, they came over on a trade mission and were there in the Oval Office like they were going to get a sweet deal. They were going to arm twist Trump, and they were going to get all sorts of sweet deal in exchange for, access to these things. Trump didn't even start the conversation. He just pantsed them right there to the whole world for who they really were, literally. And China's in their back pocket. Soros associations and across South Africa, predominantly up in the farming regions outside of the area that I'm in. Bank to terrorize the rest of the population. So the stories about how and it's done to terrorize the people to try to get them all to leave, and then their farms, ranches, wealth just get absorbed. They don't take anything away with them. And these are people that have been here for a very long time, settled those regions, built those things, and so that's where the fight is. It would be very akin to people going in and doing something similar across the Midwest, and the rest of the country just watching on while 100 people a day. By the way, on proportion, South Africa has a population of about 70 million. The region that I'm in, the total population that we're breaking off is about 7 million. And it's about 15% of the total land mass of South Africa, about 10% of the population. And the main area where I'm at here in Cape Town, within 25, 30 miles, is about 5 million, just a little under. So kind of gives you a mental picture. America's up there at 350, arguably at over 10%, probably closer to 12 to 14%, depending on who you're asking, is this illegal population that's come in that are not actually U.S. citizens, and but are living in the country, just for scale or proportion. So very important area, though, an amazing area.
Yeah, it's I've looked at that area for a long time. I remember when I was in the SEAL, for early days of SEAL teams, we were talking about Africa quite a bit. It seems to have fallen off, but now it seems to be back on the burner. What is the big push in Africa?
Well, overall in Africa, China. Let me compare. I don't think I've heard anybody say this, but I have an article that I haven't published that I wanted to publish a couple of years ago with the next book, and I probably will publish it here shortly. But England, it said that the sun never set on the British Empire when they were fully in power, and it looks like they're kind of way cut back. The reality is that their strategy that they had for the last 500 years was to control the choke points of commerce around the world, the seven seas, if you will. And they did so by controlling the key choke points to the various continents. So when you think of Hong Kong, when you think of Gibraltar as a gate to the Mediterranean, each of these areas, all of China, and the trade comes to Hong Kong, to a central point, and then out to the rest of the world. From a seafaring perspective, you control these sea choke points, and then you control whole regions, whole continents. for the purposes of trade and commerce and like that.
Mhm.
And so their empire was based around by sea, controlling the movement of goods around the world from these key choke points, 7 key locations around the world. Even now, these Commonwealth countries that they've retained control and uh, uh, work through still heavily control and influence trade across the world. China, which is being run almost like a branch office of the Brits behind the scenes, hard to get your mind around, but it's actually there from a military side. China's strategy is to similarly own the next 500 years. And so they have been working for quite some time, arguably the last 50, 60 years, to gain control of industries within the raw materials of wealth that come from various places around the world. And they've identified the raw materials that you need for manufacturing to sustain a population, etc. And they've gone to the various parts of the world and tried to control those locations or regions by doing deals, making loans, building things, and then obligating the populations for whatever they've loaned into. And so, for example, in the mining, they have had a steady, very dedicated effort to get into regions where certain types of raw materials, like up in the Congo, you have multiple very rare types of materials that are highly valuable. Um, uh, Cobalt being one of them, other rare earths being in there, and they've gone in and tried to control specific mines, specific locations on the map, and then the countries around them or the politics around them, and in order to uh, have some control over the rest of commerce, they see the future of manufacturing, the most important core material that you have to have in this, the new machinery, the new technology that will dominate, 50, 100 plus years, into the future, um, related to magnetism, electromagnetic energy transfer, and coherency. The rare earth elements we keep hearing all about, but then other minerals that you need for volume. In the Congo, they have a zinc mine, or excuse me, a copper mine, and when that region was captured back just prior to Christmas by people friendly to China, there was about a dozen different countries or groups that were in the Congo doing mischief when the president of the Congo, Secession, asked for help and said, Trump, you can have everything. You have all the mining, all the minerals in the whole country. Just, help us, save us. And they took over that copper mine. Within a matter of days, the price of copper went up like 30, 40% just because of that one mine at that one strategic location that got taken over by these communist, ISIS, Chinese groups working together that took over that mine that was actually run by an American company. And in the course of what we did, what Trump did in pushing back, they were made an offer that they couldn't refuse, and they vacated that area and pulled back. And once it was apparent that was going to happen, then copper prices restabilized somewhat. But that's how, on a we're in a very tippy area, and small changes in small regions on mining, for example, could change costs and pricing and things like that radically. So China has this objective of controlling, even within their Silken Road idea, the routes of commerce over land to get to Europe, to get to other locations to sell their goods and to do commerce and to control those routes and then control the key locations for extraction of raw resources. A next generation or generations variation of what the Brits did by controlling the key trade routes and the harbors, the cities, and building them up in those key areas. And by the way, the British way of doing things is divide and conquer. So they'd always have 3 or 4 groups in an area that they would put in close proximity, keep them at each other's throats, and one was always rising up, the other 2 were trying to work it out. As soon as those 2 pick one of the sides that wants to join, then there's a third man out. It's a different one. They keep doing this roundy round stuff, and so you'll go to places where they've been, like Syria or Iraq, and you got 3 different groups there primarily, and they're all constantly fighting each other, and somebody's coming in having to settle it down. It's the same thing here in South Africa with different of the tribal groups, and they're constantly aiding one and tamping down another, and then another one rises up, and they keep doing this roundy round to keep the country from being stable, if you will. Same thing up in Rhodesia. Rhodesia was one of the most stable countries in Africa. It was the pearl of Africa in its own way. We call Uganda the pearl of Africa, but Rhodesia was really this amazing area. And then as soon as they declared their statehood, the mischief came in. And from the viewpoint here in South Africa, and one of the people that was here today that I spent quite a bit of time with grew up in Rhodesia and in that whole era, and said, no, there was no question. The people that messed it up, he didn't use that word, he was a bit more flowery, were the Brits. And they wanted it. It suited them for the broader region, what they want. If you wanted to say what is at the heart of a lot of this problem.
Yeah, it seems like
the
the
secret
Brits.
societies out of England as being the core.
Yeah, it seems like the Brits, they like
Yeah, go ahead.
divide and conquer. I had Sheila Holm on a couple of days ago, and we talked about some of this, where the United States has been like the old, British Empire, going in and conquering. You go to World War I, World War II, all around the world, where we come in and conquer, and then we come in and build those countries back up, and we never get the benefit of that. So, and it seems like
they use us like
yes.
their army, and then it's our blood, our guts, our machinery, our technology, and then they'll sift their way back in to take advantage of it. Yeah.
So it looks like we may be moving in a more higher calling direction, trying to help these countries.
Well, I don't think we can do much to help most of these places right now. America coming in, I will tell you this, here in this area of South Africa, all eyes are on the U.S. and President Trump. And they are praying, wishing, hoping that we could come in and help them against this, group that has hijacked their country. And by the way, just so everybody understands more precisely, elections, the election integrity, it's broadly understood in all these countries across Africa, but especially here in South Africa, that the group that got into power here got in through election fraud. And they were 0.5% from having a 2/3 vote majority where they could have changed the Constitution. They won power and got into power, 25 years ago and more, 30 years ago. But when they got in, they were just a hair shy of enough to change the Constitution.
Mm.
Had they gotten just that little bit more, everybody here is like, it'd have been the night of the long knives. They'd have been out slaughtering everybody. But they didn't quite have that ability, so they had to work within the law to do a lot of the stuff that they're doing. And they've legislated essentially people out of their houses and homes to steal it all.
Yeah.
And those that are in power right now for their families and like that. And it's just been a transfer of wealth into these groups, the ANC groups that are here. Um, what they're hoping is that the U.S. Somehow helps them to get to even fair elections. See, all the election observers that have come in to certify that the elections are fair here, those election observers themselves keep calling elections fair, and everybody's going, what are you talking about, a fair election? It's insane. You know that they had power outages that conveniently started as soon as the vote's done. A few hours later, they're counting. They have a power outage, and the power doesn't come on till the next afternoon.
Mm.
All of a sudden, the votes are completely changed from where they're going. And people get into power and going, how did that guy win? Nobody even knew his name. It's very clear that they haven't had fair elections here for a very, very long time. And
Yeah, I
so
think going all the way back to Nelson Mandela. There's a lot of people
that's
talk about this, that was a basically a captured operation. It wasn't about, overcoming apartheid. It was basically the opposite. So, they, blacks claim that, the whites were mistreating them. But now the blacks are mistreating the whites. And like you're talking about, the election unintegrity was huge in that time frame. And it looks like it's something that needs to be, fixed around the world.
Well, a lot of the folks, and I had the benefit of having other people from other countries in the region here. They actually, are of a mind, and not just whites, if you will, blacks and coloreds, are in agreement. Hollywood played a huge part in shaping the perceptions of what was really going on. And they're actually very disturbed by the way Hollywood projects out a lot of the information because it doesn't actually fit what actually happened. Um, and, for example, Mandela, he's worshiped practically in democratic circles and many of the countries out there. But the people here, there's no question in their mind. This is, the people that have followed in his footsteps and what he's done have been in the way that they have moved forward, and they want to have it, claim it's a tit for tat or something like that. Certainly in this region where I'm at, the people here, the ones that want to break away from South Africa amongst the colored community, it's an overwhelming majority. It's in the 90th percentile. Of the blacks, as you would say it here, the number is still over 50% of the population. They don't want anything to do with what's going on further north. It's such a horror and an embarrassment. And so there's quite a bit of unity on how to move forward or what needs to be done. And so, yeah. But, to think about how we in America, our perceptions of what's going on politically, with Obama wanting to do the Civil War movie, a modern Civil War in America, he and Michael. There's propaganda from Hollywood that's affected the way things are going on here in Africa that do not portray the truth of what's really going on, manipulating world opinion against the people here in South Africa, in this Cape region.
So I saw that one of the generals, McInerney, I believe it was. I saw an interview with him, and he was talking about how they'll probably do some nice, flyovers with F-35s and all kind of stuff. And I just saw that, yeah, they do have B-2s and F-35s are flying overhead, with the Trump-Putin meeting right now. So I know you have talked about this, and it's almost came to pass a few times about this nuclear standoff. Where do you see that going?
Well, the reason that I've mentioned it is because in America, the shadow government that is the elephant in the room that Cheney talked about. The shadow government really is senior executive service. And senior executive service claims that their mandate, of course, you can go on the Wikipedia, read about senior executive service. Their mission statement is that they provide continuity in government between elected administrations. The continuity that, say, a politician is a 2-year representative or a 4 or 6-year term of office. A lot of these things play out over decades. And so they claim the right to have some control and decisions. They're the ultimate deep state. Politicians come and go, but they keep things on an even keel and make the long-term decisions, enforce longer-term objectives, etc. So they claim the authority to decide when and how to use nuclear weapons if there's problems in elected government and doing that effectively, precisely. Now I'm talking behind the scenes, not what's said within the public side. When Trump left office after his first term, those authorities were not turned over to Biden. And that's something that people will be arguing and debating over decades to come. I'm just telling you, it didn't happen. And when Trump left the White House on January 20th, 2021, he was still president. When he got on the helicopter, he was still president. When he got on Air Force One, he was still president and commander-in-chief when he landed in Florida and went all the way to Mar-a-Lago. And so the briefcase traveled with him and has to be within 2 doors of the president at all times. And when Biden on another unit was read in, he did not have the codes. The biscuit wasn't passed to him. He was recognized as the elected president of the United States, with some questions over the legitimacy of that election. And there was a military review done for 50 days, 45 plus 5 days between the services afterwards. And never did Biden have his finger on the nuclear key and anything would have happened. He might have been able to push the button, but it would not have been recognized at the launch control locations. And so the question is, who had that authority? Because Trump never handed off the baton, because of things that happened in the 50s as nuclear systems came online and the 54 code, in the way that power is passed, the idea being that, you could have space aliens, you could have doppelgangers, situations existed where there may be some question as to whether or not the person even, purporting to be the president was truly the real person. Sci-fi movies and things like that, there were certain protocols put in place that did not allow that Trump could convey those authorities. When they invaded Mar-a-Lago and went through everything and turned everything upside down, what were they looking for? Some said the Blue Book, which had all of the stuff from Crossfire Hurricane. Others, some pages on nuclear secrets that were, related to other countries that Trump shouldn't have. The reality is they were looking for the biscuit. And Trump actually told you that last summer during the campaign when somebody raised something. He says, what, you think I was going to leave the nuclear launch codes in a teenager's video game drawer? Are you kidding me? Referring to Hunter, to Barron. He told you what they were looking for. They were looking for the launch codes for the biscuit. And then, of course, Trump, the biscuit has to be on your physical body, person, or within arm's reach at all times. The president, commander-in-chief, could not hand the biscuit off to Melania, couldn't hand it off to the head of his security detail, Secret Service. He couldn't give it or convey it to anyone. Had to be on his physical body or within arm's reach at all times. And can't be conveyed to anybody. And so what I've told your audience and others is that what Trump did, he declared national emergency March 13th of 2020. March 15th of 2020, he went to Cheyenne Mountain, did a walkthrough, the underground nuclear base in the mountain there in Colorado. And then at the conclusion of it, he sealed up the base. There's all sorts of stuff where, yes, the outer door is open, but the inner door isn't. They've continued to maintain the base in a lockdown condition internally. It's classified, all the stuff related to it. A bunch of people, I know Bifford, I've been there, have you been there, blah, whatever. The short version is the only place the biscuit could be other than the president's person or within arm's reach is where the codes already existed on the other half at Cheyenne Mountain. He turned those in there, and then those codes were locked in place. They were never changed. Trump memorized the biscuit, everything in there. And that's why after Trump left office in 2021, a couple months later, he had this medical check where they also tested his memory, and he aced everything, including his memory. What was that for? For the benefit of the people in the mountain. He hasn't forgotten anything. He knows all the codes, and he's the de facto authority should there be a nuclear emergency. In the case of a nuclear emergency, like what happened in Hawaii, if a lot of people have forgotten this, you had a message went out on cell phones, and the sirens went off all over Hawaii. And on the cell phones, the message was a missile launch has been detected. Intercontinental ballistic missile launch has been detected and is headed for Hawaii. So everybody bend over, kiss your ass goodbye. People for an hour were believing that a nuclear bomb was headed for Hawaii, going to blow up, probably in Pearl Harbor. And it was very traumatizing for everybody in Hawaii. That was, especially as you got closer to that location. Although there's locations in other the islands that could be hit, Maui being one of them precisely. And but in reality, how many nuclear bombs blew up in Hawaii that day? None. The alarms went off just before an hour had gone by. Said some guy bumped a light switch with his elbow in an office he'd worked in for years and accidentally turned on the alarms, and the codes went out to the cell phones. Complete, total rubbish bullshit. But what else happened during that time period? All of the computer systems, including military systems and federal three-letter agency systems that monitor communications across Asia into China, all of the South Pacific region. All of those servers, all of those computer systems on an emergency basis scrammed. They went into an emergency mode and turned off other functions and began sending all the data they had in their data banks back to the mainland. And it was stored in computers within the NORAD system. That was done twice, so that any information that developed even after this launch announcement was also sent, plus also a guarantee if there was anything that didn't go through right. And one of the key features there is that the assumption when everything was downloaded, because it's believed, that Hawaii could be destroyed, key systems could be destroyed in a nuclear attack. So that data, which would be critical to, for mounting a defense, to doing offense, military, anything, is back at the mainland. But it's assumed that maybe like SAP programs, special access projects, where only a handful of people or even just one person may have the access to information storage, activities, etc. That information, yet it could have critical national security information that we need as a country to have. So in this download, the access codes go with the information when it scrams. So imagine that projects that are completely isolated, top secret, nobody's supposed to know about it, those programs, the access codes to access that information are sent with it. Now, if you have something that happened in the mainland across the rest of America with a nuclear attack, the systems all through the federal system, including military and defense, and the spy systems, intelligence, etc., they would also scram to protect that information, and it would go into the NORAD security system and data system with the access codes. Look at what's going on right now with all these special projects that are being revealed that the intelligence people, Brennan and others, were all involved in. Comey running secret operations at FBI. Do they have data? Do they have programs? Do they have information that is secreted? And if you get into a nuclear emergency, you might not have missiles go off in America, but the context is that it could be happening, and those systems would download. When Trump sealed everything up on March 15th, 2020, that's never been unlocked since. So the codes are all still in place, and it could scram and we'd have access to everything, and that's part of the question.